You get your paycheck on the first of the month. Rent, groceries, gas, the babysitter. Gone before the deposit even finishes settling. You work another 8 hours tomorrow to refill it. That's the deal you signed up for, even if nobody ever said it out loud. But somewhere out there, quietly, without clocking in, another version of your money is already working. And for a small number of people, that quiet version now earns more in a year than they do at their job. There's a name for the moment when that switch flips. Vicky Robin and Joe Dominguez called it the crossover point in their 1992 book, Your Money or Your Life. The exact day your investment income permanently exceeds your expenses. Not your income, your expenses. After that day, in theory, you never have to work again. Most people assume that day requires a fortune, a number so large it belongs to someone else's life. But the real threshold is smaller, stranger, and closer than you think. And it has almost nothing to do with how much you earn. Here's the part that surprises people first. The crossover point isn't about hitting a specific net worth. It's about the relationship between two numbers, what your assets generate and what your life costs. Someone earning $220 in a year with a $9,000 a month lifestyle can be further from that line than someone earning $65,000 who lives on $2,800 a month. Income builds the pile. Spending decides how tall the pile needs to be before it can support you. So how tall does the pile actually need to be? In 1994, a financial advisor named William Bengen ran the numbers on nearly a century of U.S. market returns, including the Great Depression and the stagflation of the 1970s. He was trying to answer one question: how much can someone withdraw from an investment portfolio every year without running out of money over a 30-year retirement? His answer, refined over years of follow-up research, became known as the 4% rule. Withdraw roughly 4% of your portfolio in year one, adjust for inflation after that, and in the vast majority of historical scenarios, the money outlasts you. Flip that 4% around, and it becomes a multiplier. If your investments need to generate 4% of their value every year to cover your expenses, then your portfolio needs to be roughly 25 times your annual spending before withdrawals alone can replace a paycheck. Spend $40,000 a year, and the number is $1,000. Spend $70,000 a year, and it's $1,750,000. Spend $24,000 a year, and it drops to $600,000, a number that stops feeling abstract once you actually run your own expenses through it. That's the mechanical version of the crossover point. But there's a second version, one that shows up long before the spreadsheet says you're done. The moment your investments start growing by more in a single year than you can earn by working harder. Picture two people standing at the same starting line. One has a job that pays $75,000 a year, with raises that struggle to outrun inflation. The other has a portfolio worth $900,000, sitting in a mix of index funds. In an average year, the market has historically returned somewhere around 7% after inflation. On $900,000, that's roughly $63. Zeroes in, generated without a single hour of labor, without a boss, without a commute. Get that portfolio to $1.5 million, and a 7% year produces $105,000. At that size, a strong market year can out-earn a full-time job, and a weak one can still cover most of it. The paycheck stops being the main event. It becomes a backup generator. This is the part people find uncomfortable to hear, so let's say it plainly. For a lot of working professionals, the fastest path to your money earns more than you isn't a promotion. It's compounding. Thomas J. Stanley and William Danko documented this pattern for years and published it in the Millionaire Next Door in 1996. Their research on American millionaires found something that broke the popular image completely. Most of them weren't doctors driving imported cars or executives with corner offices. They were small business owners, teachers, mid-level managers, people with unremarkable incomes who consistently invested the gap between what they earned and what they spent for decades and let the market do the heavy lifting. Stanley called high earners who saved almost nothing under-accumulators of wealth, and the modest earners who quietly built seven-figure portfolios prodigious accumulators of wealth. Income predicted almost nothing. Behavior predicted everything. Robert Kiyosaki made a version of this same point in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, published in 1997. He split everything you own into two categories: assets, which put money into your pocket whether or not you show up, and liabilities, which take money out. Most people, he argued, spend their careers accumulating liabilities they've been taught to call assets. A bigger house, a newer car, a lifestyle that looks successful but produces nothing on its own. The crossover point only gets closer when the things you own actually generate income. A paycheck isn't an asset in that sense. It's a rental agreement on your own time, and the moment you stop showing up, it stops paying. The Federal Reserve's survey of consumer finances adds a sobering layer to all of this. Its most recent data shows the median American household holds a net worth far below the level needed to reach a crossover point at typical spending. Most families are still years, sometimes decades, from the ratio flipping in their favor, which makes the households who do cross it less a story about extraordinary income and more a story about an ordinary gap protected for long enough that the market eventually did the rest. So let's walk through what actually happens when someone crosses that line for real. Say you're 34. You earn $80,000 a year, and after 15 years of steady investing, nothing dramatic, just consistent contributions to a diversified portfolio, you've built it to $850,000. This year, the market returns 9%. Your portfolio grows by $76,500. Your salary, after taxes, nets you around $61,000. For the first time, the thing you built earned more than the thing you show up for. You didn't get a raise. You didn't work later. You just owned enough for long enough for the math to flip. Now compare that to a coworker who earns $140,000. Nearly double, but spends almost all of it. A bigger apartment, a newer car every few years, dinners out that never get questioned because the income resports it. 15 years in, their portfolio sits at $180,000. A 9% year adds $16,200. Their after-tax salary alone still dwarfs their portfolio's output by a factor of 6. Same market, same 15 years, completely different position relative to the crossover point. Because one of them protected a gap, and the other one never let a gap exist long enough to invest. Here's the twist that catches most people off guard. Crossing that line doesn't feel like an event. There's no notification, no ceremony. Most people who reach it don't even notice for months, because they're still going to work the next morning, exactly like they did the day before. The crossover point isn't a finish line you run through. It's a threshold you quietly walk past, usually while checking your phone for something unrelated. And it isn't permanent either. A bad year can pull you back below the line, just as quietly as a good one pushed you across it. In 2008, portfolios that had crossed the crossover point for years watched it evaporate in months, as markets fell nearly 40%. That's the part the get rich and coast narrative leaves out. This isn't a wall you climb once and never think about again. It's a ratio you have to keep tending, because both sides of it, what you own and what you spend, keep moving. Which brings up the part that actually matters more than the number itself. You control one side of that equation almost completely, and the other side only partially. You can't force the market to return 9% this year instead of losing 20%. But you can decide, this month, whether your expenses creep upward every time your income does. A pattern researchers call lifestyle inflation, where a raise gets absorbed by a nicer apartment, a newer car, a subscription you forgot you added, and the gap between income and spending, the exact fuel that builds the portfolio, quietly shrinks to nothing. That gap is the entire mechanism. Not your salary, not your job title. The distance between what comes in and what goes out. Invested and left alone long enough for the market's average returns to compound on themselves, year after year, until one year the compounding alone outpaces your paycheck, which is why the real question was never, how much do I need to make? It's, how large is the gap I'm willing to protect? Someone making six figures who spends every bit of it is standing still. Someone making a fraction of that, who protects even a modest gap for 2 decades, is walking steadily toward a day their money starts paying them more than their employer does. You'll still get a paycheck on the first of the month. Rent, groceries, gas, the same math, the same bills. But somewhere in the account you rarely check, another version of your money keeps working, quietly, without clocking in. And for the people who protect that gap long enough, there comes a year when the number in that quiet account grows by more than the number in the loud one ever could.